Being a parent is one of the most significant and challenging roles in our lives. In schools, we learn to calculate the area of a triangle or what is the longest river in the world. But unless you go to the pedagogical or psychological studies, you won't get any science-based information about how to raise a child. You can find infinite advice on the internet, but most will do more harm than good. That is why I invited a special guest, an expert in building a good relationship with your kids. Together with Agnieszka, we'll discuss topics like, should there be a state parenting exams? What do we need to do to be good parents? Should our children be our friends? How to use the coaching method as a parent? And many, many more. Let's talk about the parenting habits. Hi, my name is Andrzej and welcome to the Helpful Habits. In this podcast, we'll learn how to employ good habits that will do the hard work for us, how to change our lives for the better, not by taking massive leaps, but with the help of small, easy to implement steps. This podcast is brought to you by The Land of Habits, the educational board game with which you will develop new habits and skills. Check it out on landofhabits.com. Hi Agnieszka, it is great to have you here.
Hi Andrzej, thank you very much for the invitation.
Can you introduce yourself, tell our listeners who you are and what you do professionally?
I'm a coach, a mentor, and a crisis coach, and I work with mothers who struggle with stress, with anger outbursts, and with crisis. And I'm also a certified facilitator of self-rec, which is the so-called Shanke method for understanding stress and managing energy and tension. I'm also a certified trainer of the Institute of Positive Crisis Therapy. And I teach grown-ups how to support others who are in psychological crisis. Providing the so-called psychological first aid. And I also have written 3 books entitled Self-Regulation, Stories for Children on How to Act When Emotions Take Over. And these are stories for children with difficult situations, everyday difficult situations, followed by chapters for adults where I describe how to understand what happened through the lens of stress. And last but not least, I'm a mother of 3 boys, very energetic boys, aged 11, 9, and 6. So, I'm never bored at home.
I can imagine. I am a father of 4, so we have 2 sides of parenting equation covered during our talk. To be able to drive a car, we must pass a driving test. In order to work in many professions like doctor, lawyer, we need to graduate from college. However, in the case of parenthood, I don't know any country in the world that would require completing a course or passing an exam. How would you comment on the idea of the state parenting exam?
A state parenting exam like the one for a driving license, I think it's a fantasy, a utopia, or rather a dystopia, because I think it's impossible to implement such an obligatory parenting exam unless we have a word, from Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale or The Testament. So unless we have some authoritarian or even totalitarian regime. So it's not something I dream of, but I do dream of a society where up-to-date knowledge about child development, about child psychology or parenthood is really available to everyone who's interested. And I also dream of a society where mothers and fathers are supported in any possible way. And I also dream of societies that let children be children, just not little copies of well-behaved adults.
Very nice. I agree that government controlling such an intimate aspect of our life like parenthood maybe isn't the best idea. On the other hand, bookstore shelves are overflowing with parenting books. how to know which of them are a joyful creation based solely on the author's thoughts and which of them present evidence-based knowledge?
It is a difficult task, but I do believe that every parent has some, inner voice telling them whether what they're doing is right for the child, for the parent, or wrong. Let me give you an example, a personal example. When I gave birth to my eldest son, who was a very high-need baby, so to say, he was very needy, he needed a lot of attention, and he didn't sleep well. I came across a book. The advice was to sleep train the child in the way that, you put the child into the cot and then you count. Like till 10, and then you pick the child up when the child is crying, hold it for a second, and then put the child down again. And I tried to do it once. It took me 1 hour and a half. The child was almost suffocating from crying. I was in such a distress that I couldn't sleep the following night. And I decided, okay, the book should be thrown away. Okay. So I think if you really feel that something is wrong with the method or the person who's teaching you, just don't do it. So I do believe in parental instincts.
Mm-hmm. And what would happen if this first experience was good for you, if this method was useful for the couple of times and later on it didn't? Maybe then you will struggle more believing it or not, because the first time it get the proper results.
No, that's really a difficult question, because if something works, then you think it's a good method. And for example, shouting at children does work. Okay, I mean, here in the instant, the children stop doing what they are doing, whatever they are doing wrong. But over the longer run, you notice that you need to shout more in order for them to stop doing those things. So I think you do notice at some point that you went the wrong way, and you can always correct your own behavior. You can always change. So I think this observation, what any method does to you and to your child and your relationship, is just key.
Mm-hmm. And thinking also long term, not only on this immediate results.
Immediate results are sometimes very tempting, like, the child stopping doing whatever they do. But over the longer run, you see that the child is more nervous, that you are more nervous, that you see your child as a disobedient kid, not a kid, or, I don't know, malicious. So you do notice that something's wrong.
Mm-hmm. And now we move to the question very well connected to the last sentence. Many people associate being a parent with the need to discipline children, communicate do's and don'ts, make sure they are followed. However, our role as a parents doesn't end there, or maybe even don't start there. So what we should do to be good parents?
You may be surprised, but I totally disagree with this discipline view of parenting. I mean, if you think of National Socialist Germany or communist regimes, all that terror, all that suffering of millions of people was caused by individuals who were obedient to authorities. They were just doing what they were supposed to do. They followed the do's and don'ts. So this is perhaps a very extreme example, but I think that if you say what should be done and what shouldn't be done, this is not enough. Okay? And children should be given some freedom to judge for themselves whether these do's or don'ts are right. I firmly believe that the role of the parent boils down to building a relationship with the child based on trust and on respect. Because children do not do what you tell them to do. They do what they observe. If you respect them, really respect them, but set limits at the same time, they will respect others and set their own limits. So this is the most important thing, and that bond, that relationship is really proven to shape the brain of the child, the developing brain. And those people who had this bond, this safe relationship with caregivers at a very young age, they are shown to be more resilient, have more success in life generally, be more healthy, and so on and so forth. So the relationship is the most important thing that you can give to your child.
Mm-hmm. This absolute freedom probably isn't possible, especially if we have many children and each of them want to do something else in the same time or watch a different film on the TV. So what is our role as a parents? Do we need some rules? How to establish them, maybe in cooperation with our kids?
Whenever it's possible, you should work out the rules for your own family together with the kids. Of course, I wouldn't ask a kid whether or not they want to touch fire, open fire. I mean, safety first. But whenever it comes to things like watching TV or rules related to play or time outdoor, you can consult your children, and you can say state rules that were worked out in a family discussion.
Mm-hmm. My wife uses such a trick that when she wants to dress or help dressing our children, and they are in this phase that they want to have all the decision on their own, so she pre-selects 3 options and asks them which of these 3 options you choose. And in this way, they don't end up with t-shirts in winter. They have warm clothes, but we pay the respect to our children. You can choose in a limited way, but still. Do you think this is a good strategy?
Yes, it's a very good strategy, provided the children accept it, because, there are children who will not accept any piece of clothing proposed by the parent. So, okay, it doesn't work for every child, but I think it's a very good example of having both limits and freedom. So freedom within limits, that's all about parenthood, actually.
Mm-hmm. In my psychology studies, I came across the intriguing phrase that parenthood is a one-sided friendship. And we as parents support children and help them financially, emotionally, in every way we can.
Yes.
We listen to our children's stories about their successes and problems as a friend would. What can we do to make this friendship two-sided? And should we strive for it at all? Should our children be our friends?
I don't think our children should be our friends. When we talk about friendship, we think about people who support us as well. They are supported by us, but they also support us. And a child shouldn't be supportive of the parent as a rule. If a child feels responsible for the well-being of a parent, this is called parentification, and it has some serious consequences for the mental health of the child. Not friendship, but at the same time, you shouldn't be, authoritarian or too responsible, too caring for the child. The term helicopter parenting, which means that some parents hover over the child and remove every obstacle or intervene in every situation that is somehow unpleasant for the child. So this kind of parenting doesn't allow the child to develop many important skills like frustration tolerance. If the child doesn't practice frustration or, overcoming frustration, they will never learn to do it. Okay, they have to do it by practice. Respect, yes. As much freedom as possible, yes. Freedom to make their own choices, to make our own mistakes, to explore opportunities that life gives them, or develop talents that are strange to us. Yes, it is important to give them some safe base and roots, but at the same time to let them grow their wings.
Mm-hmm. Maybe our children has friends in their life and they have plenty of them. They don't need one extra. What they really need to have a parent, a mother or a father. And
yes.
This is our role. This is reserved for us.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. On the one hand, I want to help my children. especially when they struggle. On the other hand, I care about their independence, that they learn to deal with difficult emotions, they are not afraid to failure, etc. How to reconcile these two needs?
Well, this is really difficult because when we see our child fail or about to fail, it is really difficult to us, and sometimes it's even more difficult to us than to the child themselves. I think that especially when children are involved in some difficult situations that we don't know ourselves from our own experience. Okay, so imagine, for example, that your teenage child is very unhappy and angry because that friends excluded them from a Facebook group or a messenger group. So we do not have such experience as teenagers, probably. I mean, perhaps there are very young parents here listening, but okay, I'm 43 and I didn't have any internet as a child. So,
or mobile phone as a kid.
Yes, exactly. So there was this meme, this joke. Your child is asking, "Mom, did you never ever lose your phone when you were little?" No, I never lost my phone because it was standing firm in the kitchen, forever, wired to the socket. But coming back to the question, it is difficult to decide, and I think parents should decide in a way on a case-by-case basis. So you look at the situation and you wonder, what is it about? What are your feelings about what is going to happen or about what happened? What scenarios are possible? How bad is the worst case scenario? Because if the worst case scenario is, for instance, that my child gets kidnapped from the street and disappears forever, then I will not let the child to go to the street. But if the worst case scenario is that the child has to wait, I don't know, for 1 year to study what they wanted to study, then it's perhaps not a catastrophe. It's maybe a year when they develop something, some new skills, they learn something, they go abroad. Okay, so this is the question. These are the questions that you can ask yourself. And I wanted to share one sentence of an American psychotherapist, Jennifer Calari. I love that lady. She once said, "You basically have two emotions, love and fear." And I love this sentence because it really gives me the tool to decide in every situation with a child. Whenever I have a dilemma, for example, should I let my child read longer, yes, and go to sleep later, or shouldn't I? I ask myself, what does love tell me to do, and what does fear tell me to do? And I try to opt for love always. It's not always easy, but if I ask myself that question, then I build this habit of looking from a wider angle and really opting for the child's good and for our relationship.
Let's stick to this example and explore it a little further. So I fear that my child will maybe don't sleep enough. They will have a problem to concentrate in the school because of that. And my love tells me that I would like them to maybe finish the book or do any other activities that they really want. So how I should react? Going by love mean letting them do what they want?
No, you could love and fear could tell you just the opposite. For example, love tells you that you want your child to be to sleep well, to have good habits, to stick to some rules. For example, after 9 o'clock we switch off the lights, for example. And fear can tell you to let them read further. Otherwise, they would be very angry at you, and they will be, grumpy in the morning, and the day will be, a lost day. So anything goes, and this love makes you closer to your values, to what's important to you. And I love reading, but at the same time, it's important to me that my children sleep well and long enough.
Uh-huh. My rule of thumb in this situation, should I help or not, is asking my children, do you need my help? And in many cases, they say no. I want to do it myself. And even though I know it will be faster, it will be more efficient if I help them, maybe even they can learn something from me, I try not always do it, especially in a hurry, but I try to respect that. And sometimes they have a second thought, and after 5 minutes, they ask me for my help.
Yes.
But I show them the respect. You can decide. I don't throw this help at you, even if it's unwanted.
Yes, exactly. I do the same thing. I try to, at least.
The coaching method is often used in business. It assumes that instead of telling the client what to do in a given situation, we try to stimulate the client to find answers by asking questions. After all, they know their position and context much better than we do. Can a similar model work in a parent-child relationship? If so, how to successfully implement it?
I think it can work, absolutely, although with some limitations that are related to the child's resources or skills. In coaching, you assume that your client has skills and all the resources that are necessary to achieve their goals, and the coach just helps the client reach for those resources. And if the client doesn't have the resources, either the goal is unrealistic, it should be reset, or apart from coaching or instead of coaching, the client should be offered some other tools, some other support like mentoring or training. Sometimes the client needs medical treatment instead or psychotherapy. Imagine, for example, a person who is obese and needs to lose some weight, like 20 kilos or so, and it doesn't work, and they come to a coach, and the coach needs to ask whether the person has already consulted a doctor, a medical doctor. If not, they should start there, because it is possible that the person has some hormonal problems or has some issues, other health issues that affect this obesity. Okay, because obesity is an illness. So coaching is not enough. Okay, and similarly in parenting, you need to check carefully what resources your child has and what skills, and you should act accordingly. For example, if you have a 4-year-old who doesn't really have the skills of self-control developed very well yet, you shouldn't leave the child all alone with tasks or goals that require a lot of self-control. They need to be they need your help. But if you have a child that's already of school age, or 10 years old, 12 years old, you can give them more freedom, because you can assume that they have more of those resources needed.
Okay, great. So always we need to think about the resources that this child has.
Yes.
And according to that, limit or expand our help to them to reach their goals.
Exactly.
Great. Let's work on a real life example. My family. I have 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. Should my child's gender influence the way I raise them? Or is it better to be gender blind as a parent and treat boys and girls exactly the same way?
It depends. Most of all, it depends on your values and your beliefs about roles of women and men. For example, do you believe that women should stay at home, have children, care for the children, and men should go to work? Yes, and earn money for the living of the family. Do you think that women should do most chores at home, whereas men should be responsible for tanking the car or repairing the car or investments for the family and so on? So it depends on your views and your beliefs, and it also depends on what you want to believe. Because you may have some kind of beliefs that you don't like and you want to change. So you could then work towards changing those beliefs and acting accordingly. For example, when I was little, I observed my mom, who was a professional. She is a medical doctor, still active, and she was a university teacher. She had a doctoral degree, and she also had a second job at home. She was the one who was cooking and cleaning and doing the grocery shopping and so on and so forth. Whereas my father had much less to do at home. He was mainly resting. Although he did help. For those times, he did help a lot, but still the imbalance was huge. And I was observing it, and one day I decided I will be a father and husband, not a mother and wife, because I just didn't like the life of my mom. I decided that, but years later, it turned out that I found myself in a situation when I was staying at home for a while, and I was the only one responsible for everything around the kids. And I also did more of the course, while my husband was working very long hours, 14 hours per day. He was practically absent. And I didn't like it, but I didn't know how to change it. So I needed to really work very, very deep in psychotherapy on my beliefs and on my views of the family, and first of all on my everyday behavior that led towards or contributed to that state of affairs, so to say. And now it's much more fair. The course are much fairer at home. And my husband works a little bit more. I work a little bit less, but we feel responsible for the children. Both. We are both responsible for the children, but that demanded years of work, really, on my part.
So we need to start with our own thoughts and beliefs and make them better. And that will help our children to don't have this ballast that will bring them down,
yes,
for sure. And what about the society? Because I can think that women are equal, and I want to raise them in this way in my family. But in a moment, they will have in class a different expectation from girls, from boys. They will be encouraged to a different behavior. So should we take that into consideration, how our society where we live is treating boys and girls? Or should we be just focusing on our values and ignore the society norms?
I think it's impossible to totally ignore the society norms, although I think a norm is something that is in majority. And there's always some majority and some minority. And if you are in a minority, you have to be really self-conscious, and you have to really explain to your children that you are a bit different, and why you decided to be different, you need to show your children that they are not the whole, that the family is not the entire world. The world outside may be different, and they will be able to choose which values they follow, they live. But for the time being, the family works this way. I think that if they are pointed out these differences, they can take their own decisions. But if they don't even know that there are any, differences, or that you can be different, they will copy the society one day or another.
So it is important to say what are the norms and why we behave differently, and why we think this is the better way of living.
Yes. Let me give you an example. For example, my children, I have 3 boys. I don't have this, this difference between girls and boys. But for example, they know about homosexuals, about different genders or sex identities. And I also tell them that, most people in Poland do not know the difference, or they don't know that it is normal that some people have sexual relationships with the people of the same sex, for example. Most people think it is not normal. So be prepared for that. But I tell you with all my, authority as parent, it is normal. It is a minority, but totally normal. And I give my natural red hair as an example because there are very few people in the society, in our society that have red hair, natural red hair. But I am normal in spite of my hair or regardless of my hair color.
Very nice example. Thank you for that. Let's imagine that my child has a project or a career path that, in my opinion, has a good chance of ending up in disaster. What is my role as a good parent? Should I discourage the child from taking the path and show them all the dangers? Or perhaps it is better to be supportive because maybe I am wrong. Maybe the child will succeed.
It depends on how disastrous the disaster is. Because sometimes the disaster is only that your child will get a C on a test at school. It's not a disaster. But sometimes the disaster is unwanted pregnancy of a teen. So it's really quite, perhaps not disastrous, but it is really serious. Okay? So I think we should protect our children and intervene whenever this disastrous scenario is really bad or serious or very long-term consequences for them. But whenever this disaster is just, something very unpleasant in our own eyes, we should, sit on our hands and wait and see and observe. And when things go wrong, I just delicately ask my kids whether they need any help from me, whether they are satisfied with the results. So this coaching method is really helpful here.
Sitting on hands prevents you from biting your nails.
Yes. Or perhaps I sit on one hand and bite the nails on the other hand.
Okay.
This way.
I wrote a very interesting metaphor in Matthew McConaughey's book, The Green Lights, where he described a child climbing up the tree. And the parent was thinking, okay, if this child will fall from this height, it will end up with a little bruise. Nothing bad is happening, so I don't intervene at all. Now the child is up 2 meters. Okay, what will happen now if they will fall? Maybe they will break ankle. It is, of course, bad, but nothing that will have a long-term effect for the entire life. So, okay, I will not intervene. But at certain point, falling down from this tree can end up tragically with broken spine, with death. So this is when I absolutely must intervene. This is my role as a parent. Could be that a metaphor for our conversation?
That's a wonderful metaphor, although there are some tools that prevent you from falling. So you can provide your child with, this, I don't know how it's called, climbing tools, so that they don't fall, but only, hang down from the
safety
tree.
line.
Yes, safety line, yes.
Okay, great. And now let's show our listeners that we also struggle with this topic, that having this knowledge doesn't prevent us from not doing mistakes or thinking very hard what is the right answer in this particular situation. And this is why my question for you is, what is the hardest part for you to be a good parent and how you deal with it?
The hardest part is when I feel helpless. When something is happening, either to my children or caused by my children's actions, and I cannot do anything about it, or I try to prevent my child from doing something, but they still do. So this helplessness is the most difficult part. And at the same time, I believe that that parenthood is all about, coping with helplessness, because we somehow believe, for some stupid reason, that we can affect the child, we can raise the child, we can form the child to be someone, but we cannot. And whenever they do something, we need to remember that these are human beings that are separate from us. They are not part of ourselves. They are not, some dolls that can be, switched on and off. These are separate human beings. Even newborns are separate human beings, and mothers cannot switch they're crying off, for example. It's just impossible. Already at that point, you feel helpless because you see your child crying and you don't know why, and you don't know what to do about it. And how I cope with it? Well, I remember that these are separate human beings, and this is not my area of control or my area of influence. It's just, my area of interest, that they do things the way I would like them to do these things.
Mm-hmm. I am a Stoic practitioner, so for me this distinction between what is within my control and what is out of the control is absolutely fundamental, and I'm trying to concentrate on what I can do the best I can, and then without any guilty conscience I can say, okay, I did everything I could, and even though I would like to do more, I can have a peace with that. I can accept that there are some things that I cannot control. There are some problems that I cannot help. And for me, it is the way of dealing with this helplessness you described.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I would even add, you said I did all I could do. Perhaps I didn't do all I could do, but I am also a human being and I can be wrong sometimes, or even very often when it comes to my children. So I was wrong. I could have prevented something, but I misjudged the situation and I made a mistake. And dealing with this is the second hardest part of parenting, to me at least.
I understand. In each episode of my podcast, I present specific habits worth developing to improve a particular aspect of our life. I do it in the form of a sentence. After trigger, I'll immediately do the behavior. Thanks to that, I get the reward. For example, after I brush my teeth, I'll immediately grab a book and read a few pages. Thanks to that, I'll feel inspired. What parenting habits can you recommend that will help our listeners?
I recommend one habit that helps many times each single day. Whenever I feel negatively aroused or whenever I feel strong negative emotions, I'll immediately make a pause, take 5 long, very conscious breaths. And thanks to that, I won't react out of my, my lizard brain, but out of my human brain, the way I want to react. And thanks to that, I will have a good relationship with my child and I will be the parent I want to be.
Great. Very good point at the end of our discussion. Now, just 2 simple questions. If our listeners would like to learn more about the topic we are talking about, where they should look? What books or other source material you can recommend?
I can recommend hundreds of books, but when I was thinking about it before our interview, I decided that it's best to go to the page Happily Family by Jason and Cecilia Hilke. They regularly offer Happily Family conferences, free online conferences with plenty of experts. And I've seen several of them. I haven't seen one interview that wasn't really marvelous and very inspiring when you're a parent. So just go to that web page. You will find more resources there. And this is all about both evidence-based parenthood and knowledge about child development and so on. But it's the same. It's at the same time focused on relationship, on the general well-being of the child and the parent, and about building a world we really want to live in. So I really recommend them and the experts they interview.
We will, of course, put a link to it in the description of this episode.
Sure.
How can our listeners contact you? What page should they go to, or on which platform you check your messages more often?
They can write me an email, info@dylematki.pl.
Great. Thank you very much, Agnieszka, for a wonderful talk, and I wish you all the good luck.
Thank you very much, Andrzej. You too.
Final words. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. My 3 conclusions from it are: 1. My kids aren't the younger 2.0 version of me. Instead of trying to teach them what works for me in life, I need to help them find their way. 2. My influence over my children is limited. Punishing them to submit to my will is not the solution, even when I think I am right and they are wrong. I need to carefully and wisely use my influence as a partner, not as an absolute ruler. Ask and discuss instead of assuming you know better. Create rules for your family with your kids. Ask them for their perspective and their needs. What about yours? I encourage you to write them down and implement them. Thank you for listening. May the power of good habits be with you, and till next time.